All right, so we're going to build a Guttman chart or a Guttman chart. That's what we're going to do today. We're going to do it in Excel. This is a really useful chart. I use it for analyzing individual assessment tasks. It's really good for immediate feedback to us as the teacher as to where our class or cohort struggled, what the hardest questions were. It's actually really good for pulling apart an assessment task and working out if we made it too hard or if we made it too easy. And it's good at looking at where the class needs to work, so identifying the class's zone of proximal development and then teasing out an individual's next steps for improvement. Okay, so let's have a look. So what do we have? Here we have our sheet that we're working on. Down here is task 1, raw data. Remember, we use an individual task. This task was normally when people show this, they show it from a test. So I thought I'd show it from an assessment task, which is not a test. It's actually a report based on an experiment. And we've broken it up using the rubric into the different sections that we want to know how well the kids understood. So for example, if we look from here to here, which would be if we look at questions 6E to 6A, or the other way around, these are all the discussion questions. And the goal here is to work out what the different components of a discussion the class understood. Anyway, so that says raw data. When we've finished inputting all of this, that will be locked and no one else will be able to edit it, or they'll be able to edit it, but they'll have to intentionally edit it. They won't be able to accidentally. I think that's really important. Okay, so first off, let's go here, equals sum. So what we need to do is we need to know how much the whole deal was worth. Okay, so that's one way to do it. We type sum brackets, and then we choose the range, and it will sum all those numbers together. And as these are the values on top, that tells you what our task is. So let's actually break down how we set this up. We have each section. So if I want to look at just the introduction compared to the variables, compared to the method, easily done. So they are all labeled for each question. You see each question goes 1A, or marking point on the rubric, 1A, B, C, D, 2A, 2B, so there's only 2 points on the variables, and so forth all the way down. And each section has how many marks it's worth. Okay. So what we've done is we've added a sum of all the marks that they're worth, and that gives us a total of what it should be. So the first 3 rows are sections. If you do this for a test, you might have an extra section where you can go multiple choice, short answers, extended response, as well as what topic from the units they were. Then we have the question numbers and the value. So one way to do it was to, as we said, go sum equals this range. Another way to do it, really simple way, is to click on that one there and just click on the sum button up here. It will predict where we want it to go. We check it. Yep, that's good. Now the next thing we can do is, because we've got a lot to do here, is we can just double click this and boom, all the sums are added. There's a 0 down here. We actually don't want that one. Get rid of that. And yeah, so the questions are in order at the moment. The totals are, well, it appears that they're in order from this one here, but the next class won't be. The totals are in order, the totals aren't in order, the questions are. Now, the next thing we need is we need a standardized score. So basically, each of these questions ends up being out of exactly the same number, so that we can compare them. Because it's really hard to just sum all the parts up and compare question 1A to question 1C, because one is worth 1 and one is worth 2. So we want to standardize those scores. So we'll show you how to do that. So we go equals sum, and then we want it to be, if we click here and then Control Shift down, that will highlight that whole range. See, all of the questions here, E4 to 48, nice. Brackets divided by this number, which will be 1. But what that gives us is 35. Now, given that there are because it tells us the count down here, 45 students who sat the paper, the perfect mark here should be 45, right? That means every kid got full marks on it. So we didn't get that on this one. We'll see how we go for the rest of them. Okay, so there's some better ones. That's worth 40, and if we look at question 1C, it's worth 38 was the standardized score. So 1C, which is worth 2, because we divided it by 2. Remember, we dragged along, so when sum equals this whole range here of numbers divided by G2, which is 2, gives us 38 and 40. So these two were done quite well. Already, we can just sort of have a quick look. It's a bit, we've got to pull it apart. It's not immediately obvious, but we can have a quick look and see who's done well. All right, excellent. Now, this is our raw data, actually, and I'll give you the other thing. Our students like a percentage. So if we go this number divided by this number, that gives us the fraction of the possible score they got. But because this set has been clicked as a percentage, it's the number style, so if we make it just a straight number, a general number, it would be 0.8, but we click this percentage button, it becomes 80%, and we divide all the way down. This one, what's going on here? And we made a mistake. So AH4, as we move it down, that AH4, which is this one, will shift down one. Awesome, not a problem. So does the AH2, which is this one. So for the next one, we're going this value here, 36, divided by the word total. So that's not possible. So what we do is we come up here and we press F4. What F4 does is it fixes it. So this one here does not change. So AH2 will not change. It will always stay while the rest of it will move down. So that's why we fix it. And there we go. We're back to where we want to be. Cool. Excellent. So what we have now is we have our raw data. We don't want to mess with this. Okay, we want to leave this exactly as it is because we can make everything dynamic and come back to here, which we'll see in a different, that's for a different time. But, so we start a new sheet and we'll give the sheet a name because we should always name things useful things. So we'll call it Guttman Science B. We'll have a look at Science B class. All right, so what we do is we highlight the whole thing. We want all of it. Bring it all down. Control C, copy that across. There we go. The sizes have changed. This was a hidden line before. We don't actually need that. Let's make everything so it fits and looks really nice. So if we highlight all of the columns by clicking at the top here, and then double click when the sizing arrows appear, everything becomes the size we need it to be. This one has had a slight change. Do you know what? I'm actually going to get rid of that one because that is, not that it's not easy to fix, but the percentage is really not useful here. Here, there'll be a, I know what's happened here. So we've gone weird fractions or weird decimal places, too many. Let's sort that out. Shrink down, not wrong way. And then, well, we'll give it one more. And then we'll go here. Now, even if we just rounded that down to 42, it would still know, it would still order it in a moment using the right values. Okay, so let's shrink down because we want the whole thing to appear on the one page. Now, this is for Science B. So what we can actually do is we click at Buffy there and we go all the way down to Jane Cobb. All right. Those are all of our Science A students, and they're fine. They're perfectly valid, but we don't want them. We're only looking at this one particular class, and part of that's to make this easier, but part of it's also I would look at it as an individual class more than I would as a big group. Cool. All right. Awesome. They're not in order there, but we can sort that out. So first things first. All right. We need to get our strongest student on this particular assessment task down the bottom, and that's so that this chart makes sense, which you'll see in a minute. So we want to go strongest student down the bottom. So if we go to data and we click sort, options, just check to make sure we go options, we're going top to bottom. That's good. We want to sort by the total, and we're going to go smallest to largest because that puts our smallest at the top, our lowest performing student, to our highest performing student. Okay. so let's have a quick check. Yep, Harvey Dent hasn't done so well. Bruce Wayne has smashed it. Okay, top work. Then we want to organize the order of our questions so that we go from our strongest question on the left to our weakest question on the right. So we go back to sort data. Oh, let's cancel because we want, yep, that's all there. So we got sort data, and we want, I just don't like the way that's doing that. Let's do this one more time. And if it does it again, we'll let it go. Okay, we'll assume it's going to happen. All right, sort data. Options, left to right. Okay, we wish to sort by our lowest row, the bottom one, which is our standardized scores. And we want to go from largest, left to right, smallest. So what that would do is it gives our best done question, our easiest question on the left, and our hardest question on the right. But good. Okay, nice and simple. Now, what we'll see is that in the, for example, this class here for 4F, that was their best question. In fact, if we have a look at the count, it shows you the count of cells down the bottom here. So 23. So what that tells us is that, and the standardized score here is 23. So all students got 23. Okay, excellent, excellent, excellent. So the next thing we do is we wish to highlight all of the cells by, this is easily the most tedious part of the whole thing, and I'll speed it up in the video, but we want to highlight all the cells by their values in the total column. So for example, the first thing we want to do is we want to highlight and then conditionally format all the cells with the value of 1. Now remember, we can use individual, by holding the column, the control button down, we can highlight individual selections all together. Okay, that's all good. So we now go to Home, Conditional Formatting, and we want to give it a color scale. Green at the top, red at the bottom. Excellent, let's go. All right, so now we'll highlight all of our questions worth 3 because that was 1 right there. Now we conditionally format the exact same one, green to red, but we're going green, red, yellow, or green, yellow, red. Now we do another one, and that'll be our 2s. Excellent. So we now have a Guttman chart. What this gives us is it gives us the zone of proximal development. So if I grab my pen out here for a second, make this nice and thick so it stands out, I would, just by a quick glancing, say that this region here is our zone of proximal development. This is the area where our group, this particular class, needs to work on before they move forward. For example, Harvey Dent here. Well, okay, so let's break this down. Question 6C was our hardest question. It actually makes sense from a teaching. 6C, 6E, and D. These are the back end of our discussion. That's actually is what I would call the hardest part of the paper. Anyway, so these students here in our mock data have done quite poorly there. Maybe we read that so as a thing, or maybe this is actual data. You'll never know. So they've done quite poorly on these sections here. But there's no point, like, so if you're a student, if you're Selena Kyle, right, you've done reasonably well until this section here, right? It would make sense if you were to start working on the discussion straight away. But if you're Harvey Dent up the top here, or Henry McCoy, which is a surprise for him, he doesn't usually do so poorly in assessment tasks. What we have is there's no point these students working on this section straight away, because they've still got some work to do on what is the easier section. There's no point them going from the easier section where they're right at their edge, they're right at the edge of what they're capable of. There's no point them working in the hard section until they've mastered this. So we actually gain a roadmap for each student on what they should start working on next. And that is where this is super valuable, I think. So from this, we're able to pull out each student's where they need to start. We're able to look at what the hardest section, what the easiest section was in the paper. And that actually gives us a reason. Like if, for example, this class has the graphs right in the middle, that makes sense. Graphs can be a bit tricky, but the discussion is the hardest. What I would find concerning is that this section of the method is right there. Now that means we may have either marked the method too hard, or we need to work on how we teach that, because the method is a fairly basic aspect of our reports. So that's something I would look at on how we do it. So we've pulled out data about individual students, the overall class, and if you compare these to different classes, they tend to look different. You know, if you've got if you break your sets up into top set, bottom set, you'll find that the top set may have green all the way, and their zone of proximal development is about here. If you have a bottom set, you might find their zone of proximal development is, well, where this is, or further back towards the left-hand side. So those are two different sets of data, various sets of data we've put out. Individual student, whole class, where the class needs to work, where the class's zone of proximal development is, what the strengths and weaknesses of our individual classes are, and I'll actually show you an interesting way to show that in a second. And on top of that, what the hardest part and the easiest part in the test was. This is actually, I find this really useful, because there's a lot of time with an assessment task, we'll have a look at something and we'll be like, yeah, this section was easy, this section was hard. And the students, when we're talking to them individually, we're like, we don't understand why you struggled here. But when we look at it as a group, we actually go, well, we know that the whole class didn't slack off. So maybe that section was either harder than we thought it was, or we didn't teach it as well. And so we need to have a look and review our practices. So this is a really useful, thoughtful thing. Let's get rid of our texter here. All right. And then let's come back to over here. So the purpose of a Guttman chart, right, or most of these charts, is that the information is right there. It's really easy to find. It's really easy to see. So we want to know what our strengths and weaknesses are in this class. Now, this class has actually done pretty well. I would say a strength is where a third of the standardized score is, say, greater than 2/3, right? And a weakness is where it's less than a third. You know, that middle third, that's middle range, and we can work on that. But let's look at what strengths and weaknesses are. So we want that to show us straight away. There's all sorts of symbols you could use. You use ticks, minuses. I'm going to use strength and weakness, because sometimes what I'll do is I will black out this section here, like just to show you what I mean. Sometimes I will go home and fill this in so that that is black, so that the students can't see who's what unless you click on it. Sometimes I will show this in class. The students can see where they are, that's fine. They can see where their rank is, that's not ideal. But if we want, we can make this one black as well. See, easy, problem solved. And now we're just able to show the students where the strengths and weaknesses are and what we need to work on, and then go back to individual results. But I like to do this. So we want the information really there and easy to see. So if we go equals if, bang. Okay, the logical test is this value here is greater than, we're going to go count A, all of these, because that way if we add any students in or out, or if we copy this format for another class, this will all come along. We want to fix that range though, so that's nice. If count A is, so that'll add up all the cells with a value, which should be 23, is worth bigger than, is greater than 23, that's total possible score, times 0.66. Let's put an extra 6 in there, just for fun. So if that's our logical test, so if the standardized score is above 2/3, comma, if true, we want S to appear for big success. Now, if false, we can't just put a W here, right? Because that means anything less than 2/3 up is a weakness, and that's not true. So we do nested if, nested if formulas. So if, so we put another one in there, brackets. Okay, logical test. This one here if C27 is less than count, no, we want count A of these ones, brackets, multiplied by, again, using our asterisk. Oh, we need to fix these ones though. Next, we haven't done it while we're doing it, we have to go there. Okay, multiplied by 0.33, we don't need the extra one because that's not as funny. Comma, if true, so if this is less than that, we give it a W, or capital, for weakness, comma. And we're going to put those in brackets, so it, sorry, in quotation marks, so it knows what to put up there. Now, we need a value if false. So let's just put a space in there, so it's blank. And that's that. We need one more parentheses. We press enter, and we're good. And then see what happens if we drag this across. Oh, it's going to be good. It's going to be so exciting. All right, we have it. We can see that this class has performed really well. There's a lot of strengths here, and there's only one real weakness, and that was this sort of section here of the discussion. So that's our Guttman chart. We can, again, use this for working out how a class has performed, what sections of the paper were hard, what sections as a class we need to redo, what sections an individual needs to look at, and what sections they should be looking at as opposed to where they should start. So you can use to build a roadmap. That was fun. I enjoyed that. I hope that made sense. If you have any questions, put them in the comments below and we'll get back to you as quick as we can. Thanks for watching. Bye now.